World War II, the most devastating war in human history. Many geopolitical events and international relations today can be traced back from this war. The root cause of World War II leads all the way back to Germany in World War I. This is the rise of Nazi Germany.
Und du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe?
It is difficult to track down one single event that sparked the conflict, for ultimately it was a series of events that conspired together to eventually light the flame of war.
The world's most hated treaty, the Treaty of Versailles, thus starting World War II in 1939.
The whole world is against Hitler and Hitlerism.
In 1914, Germany had entered World War I expecting a quick victory, but because of the Schlieffen Plan, which was a strategy developed in the early 19th to avoid a two-front war, mostly against France and Russia, had ended up failing, and this led to a war on the Western Front. In 1917, Germany secured many territorial gains through the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Soon after, the things on the Western Front were not going as planned. Despite launching a major spring offense in 1918, German General Ludendorff realized that Germany couldn't fight anymore, and thought if he pushed for a ceasefire to the US President Woodrow Wilson, that he would be less punished and would perceive the German army's reputation. On October 29, 1918, General Ludendorff handed over his power to a new government, which was led by Prince Max of Baden, so they could begin armistice negotiations between the countries. Though the US President Wilson demanded the Kaiser be removed from power before anything could be signed, saying that Germany couldn't have peace under a autocratic regime. Soon after, in November 9th of 1918, Kaiser Wilhelm II had abdicated under pressure and fled to the Netherlands, ending his imperial rule of 40 years. And because of this, a socialist government had risen up to take over. 2 days later, on November 11th, the armistice was signed, making all the Germans so shocked, as they thought Germany was winning for years. After it got signed, though, a myth developed called the Deutschlandlöschung, or stab in the back theory, blaming all the new socialists.
The Treaty of Versailles was a peace agreement signed on June 28, 1919, that formally ended World War I. It was signed in the Hall of Mirrors in the Palace of Versailles, France, by both the Allies and Germany, and took full force on January 20, 1920. There were many countries involved in the Paris Peace Conference, all of which took their place within their own intentions and motivations for the treaty. There was a unanimous agreement as to who was to blame for the causes and consequences of the First World War, and all the fingers pointed to Germany. Clause 231, the War Guilt Clause, was a term Germany was forced to approve of, stating her complete responsibility for the war, losing 13% of her land and 12% of her population to the Allies. This resulted in a drastic plummeting in the socio-economic state of Germany. As for the Allies, U.S. President Woodrow Wilson wished to set up a system of international relations that could be held in place by the League of Nations. French Prime Minister Clemenceau wanted to make Germany pay for the damage they caused France and ensure it was weakened so they could not harm France again. Britain wanted to preserve their naval supremacy and enlarge its empire, but had to take on board the anti-German sentiment that was embedding itself within the Allied nations.
Hitler was born in Austria and had fought for Germany in World War I, and he was horrified when he first heard that Germany had surrendered. He wrote, "So it had all been in vain all the sacrifices, in vain the hours in which with mortal fear clutching at our hearts we did our duty, in vain the death of 2 millions. Had they died for this, so that a gang of wretched criminals could lay hands on the fatherland?" He embraced nationalist and conservative ideas, believing that the Treaty of Versailles was a diktat imposed on Germany at the end of the war without consultation, and that it was signed by the socialists of the Weimar Republic. His disgust with the treaty helped influence his decisions to become involved in politics. While he was working with the army as an intelligence agent, Hitler was sent to investigate the German Workers' Party, which was founded by Anton Drexler in January 1919 and which was suspected of plotting a left-wing revolution. It was an extreme nationalist party attempting to win over working-class support. Hitler accepted Drexler's invitation, soon becoming the leader of the party, renaming it the Nationalist Socialist German Workers' Party and making the swastika its new symbol. The party established the Sturmabteilung, or Stormtroopers, as its parliamentary group, which was led by Ernst Röhm, who recruited thousands of ex-soldiers into its ranks. The party shared similar ideologies with Mussolini's fascist party, including nationalism, social Darwinism, authoritarianism, and militarism, and had a deep hatred of communism, socialism, and trade unions. While Hitler was in prison in 1923, he wrote a book called Mein Kampf, which set out his ideas on issues like German unity, nationalism, and anti-Semitism, but the main focus of the book was on foreign policy. He emphasized his desire to overturn the Treaty of Versailles, but other ideas were also put forward. These ideas indicated that Hitler had clear foreign policy aims before he actually gained any power. Hitler had three main foreign policy aims, the first one being to revise the Treaty of Versailles due to the territorial losses, economic burdens, national humiliation, and military restrictions that Germany had faced. The second was to create a Großdeutschland. This would unify Austrian Germans with Germany, which was forbidden by the Treaty of Versailles, but it would also unify Germany with German minorities who were under the rule of other states, specifically Poland and Czechoslovakia. His final aim was to achieve Lebensraum, which translates to more space in English, and he would achieve this by expanding eastwards. This idea was fueled by the belief that the new and greater Germany should only include pure Germans, known as the Aryan race. He argued that they would need more space, which they would get by expanding east all the way to the Ural Mountains. This expansion would include dispossessing the Ukrainians, Slavs, Russians, Poles, and other inferior nations. According to Hitler, the most inferior people were the Jews. He believed that Jew influence would result in national race tuberculosis if it was left unchecked. This meant that if Germany wanted to be the dominant force in Europe, it had to be protected from contact with inferior blood. In his book Mein Kampf, we can see that Hitler saw Russia as a natural enemy of Germany because of its Jewish population and also because it was a communist country led by the Bolsheviks. He also saw France as an enemy because of what had occurred during the First World War and because of France's part in drawing up the Treaty of Versailles. In a speech in 1923, Hitler said, "France does not want reparations. It wants the destruction of Germany, the fulfillment of an age-old dream, a Europe dominated by France." However, Hitler saw Britain as a potential ally because it had opposed the French occupation of the Ruhr in 1923, and he saw it as being similar racially, but also because he admired the empire and the way it controlled so much of the world, despite being a small nation. Italy was also seen as an ally because Mussolini's government shared similar ideologies.
In 1919, rebellion came to Germany as the Spartacist communist movement, which was led by Bloody Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht, launched a rebellion. Naturally, the president at the time, who was Friedrich Ebert, a social democrat, was not too fond of this. And he had the German army as well as the Freikorps, which was a proto-fascist paramilitary organization made up of the various unemployed young men and ex-soldiers who were left jobless in the wake of World War I. He had them suppress the rebellion, and they succeeded, killing Luxemburg and Liebknecht on January 15th, 1919. Soon after, another rebellion, this one the Kapp Putsch, which was named after Wolfgang Kapp, the Freikorps leader who led it. It came when he tried to overthrow the government with a promise of making Germany great again, which might be a political slogan that seems familiar to some of you. He fled Germany after a strike in Berlin. The workers there, they went on strike to basically show their support for the current government. And after that happened, he saw the amount of people who were against him, and he left. He also disbanded the Free Corps. Even with the putsch put down, political violence did remain a staple of life in the Weimar Republic, typically by right-wing extremists against left-wing politicians. 976 total political assassinations happened between 1919 and 1922, 354 of which were by right-leaning assassins. The vast majority of them, so 326 of 376, so roughly 88%, went unpunished. This was the result of a lot of the jurors and judges at the time agreeing with them politically and not wanting them to be punished for a crime which in their eyes was like a good thing, actually. So that just goes to show how much of, it's like people still did like the government, but there were still a lot of people and the judges who were on the side of a more militaristic government, who were hoping for military control to replace the democracy they had at the time. To make matters worse, in January of 1923, French and Belgian troops invaded the Ruhr, which was the industrial heartland of Germany, so mines, factories, that kind of stuff were there. And they were looking to force Germany to pay the reparations they owed them. The German government ordered strikes and passive resistance to prevent them from getting those goods and raw materials that they demanded.
In 1923, Adolf Hitler launched his first bid to take over the German government in what would be called the Beer Hall Putschtage. During the same time, Hitler emerged as a person who helped in need. Since the state of Germany was weak and not stable, because of this, Hitler became the political leader of Kampfbund, which was an association of paramilitary groups that formed to coordinate against Weimar Republic. Kampfbund grew more radical from the leadership of Hitler, and Hitler himself began to consider the use of force for his self-gain and believing that Germany's future laid in the hands of a strong, centralized government. From this, he created a plan to overthrow the Weimar government by first taking control of Bavaria, which was a conservative and nationalistic stronghold in southern of Germany, and to use Bavaria as a base of operation and then march to Berlin to bring down the Weimar government. General Ludendorff, hearing this, gave his full support to the plan and had convinced the military that it would help restore Germany to how it was before. On the night of November 8th, 1923, Hitler and his followers marched to the beer hall in Munich called Burgerkongresskeller, where Kahr and the other Bavarian leaders were holding a meeting. Hitler disturbed the meeting and told them that the revolution had started, and ordered Kahr and the others to support him, saying that they would lead the new government together. At first, Kahr was in support of this, but backed down midway, realizing the situation, and immediately contacted the police and military. As a result, they faced an armed resistance. The morning of November 9th, 1923, Hitler and his supporters, which were about 600 men, began marching through the streets, hoping to seize government buildings and to win over more people. However, this was wrong, and it turned completely upside down as they were confronted by armed police officers, and the officers opened fire on Hitler and the marchers, killing about 16 of them, and because of this, Ludendorff and Hitler tried running away. However, the leaders noticed and the coup had failed. Following the fail of the coup, Hitler and Ludendorff were arrested and charged with treason. Though instead of silencing, Hitler had a trial that followed gave him a platform to promote his ideas to the national audience. During this trial, Hitler spoke about his vision for Germany and his belief in the need for a strong government. And this received widespread attention and garnered him support from nationalist circles. Ultimately, Hitler was sentenced to 5 years in prison but only served about 9 months before being released. And even though the beer hall was a failure, he still got to spread his idea around.
Gustav Ernst Stresemann was a German statesman during the Weimar Republic who served as Chancellor of Germany from August to November 1923 and as Foreign Minister from 1923 to 1929. Under Stresemann's leadership, from 1924 onwards, Weimar's economy recovered. Germany regained international credibility and social change accelerated. During this time, Hitler used legal and constitutional means to take power in Germany after he was released from prison. On the 23rd of March 1933, Hitler proposed the enabling law to the Reichstag. This new law gave Hitler the power to rule by decree rather than passing laws through the Reichstag and the president. If passed, the law would establish the conditions needed for dictator-like rule. Soon enough, the Nazi Party was relaunched in 1925, with Hitler as an overleader that did not secure total control over the party until 1926. Youth and female groups were created in the party, and the Schutzstaffel was created.
While Hitler was in prison, the Gustav Stresemann acted as the Chancellor of Germany and then the Foreign Minister from 1924 to 1929. While he was in power, the hyperinflation in Germany was put to a stop, the German currency was stabilized with the introduction of the Rentenmark, and the DOS plan was negotiated with the United States. The DOS plan froze German reparations for 2 years, reduced the repayments that the Treaty of Versailles demanded, and also set up loans for Germany from the United States. These plans were important in helping generate the German economy. In 1929, the DOS plan was followed by the Young Plan, in which the United States agreed to give Germany more loans. A significantly reduced reparation repayment plan was implemented to be spread over the next 50 years.
After World War I, Germany faced isolation and heavy restrictions due to the Treaty of Versailles, which imposed strict penalties and reparations. By the 1920s, Germany was struggling economically, and many Germans wanted their country to regain its position in Europe. Gustav Stresemann, Germany's foreign minister from 1923 till 1929, believed that the best way to improve Germany's situation was through cooperation with other European nations, especially France and Britain. Stresemann took several important steps. In 1925, he led Germany to sign the Locarno Treaties with France, Belgium, and other countries. Though these agreements, Germany agreed to respect its western borders with France and Belgium, which had been established in the Treaty of Versailles. This commitment was important because it reassured France and other countries that Germany did not have any plans to expand its territory in Western Europe. The Locarno Treaties were a big step toward rebuilding trust between Germany and its neighbors. By formally recognizing its borders, Germany helped ease fears in Europe, especially in France, which had been deeply concerned about future conflicts. This period of new trust and cooperation was called the Locarno Spring. People began to hope that the countries could move forward peacefully, leaving behind the conflicts of the past. The Locarno Spring brought a sense of optimism. For the first time, the end of the war European countries were beginning to believe in the possibility of peaceful cooperation. France, Germany, and others felt a new sense of security and openness towards each other. Following the Locarno Treaties, Germany took another major step towards international cooperation by joining the League of Nations in 1926. Membership in the League was a significant achievement for Germany, as it showed a commitment to working with other countries to maintain peace. Through the League, Germany could now participate in discussion on international issues, making it a partner rather than an outsider. In 1928, Germany went even further by signing the Kellogg-Briand Pact. This agreement was signed by many nations around the world, all promising not to use war as a way to resolve conflicts. For Germany, signing this pact was an important gesture, showing that the country wanted to be part of a peaceful Europe. Streseman's efforts to bring Germany back into the community of nations showed that diplomacy and cooperation could bring more benefits than isolation and hostility. His work helped to restore Germany's reputation and proved that peaceful agreements were possible, even between former enemies. The Great Depression, which started with the Wall Street crash in 1929, caused terrible problems around the world. In Germany, it hit especially hard, creating a lot of suffering and political chaos. Unemployment skyrocketed from 2.8 million in 1929 to 5 million by 1931, and then to 6 million just the year after. About 1 in 3 Germans did not have a job, leaving many families desperate and hungry. Germany's government, led by Chancellor Heinrich Brüning, tried to fix the crisis by cutting government spending and lowering wages, but these actions only made things worse. Unemployment kept rising, wages dropped, and so did food prices. While cheaper food might seem like good news, it hurt small farmers financially, forcing many into bankruptcy. At the same time, Germany's economy got worse. Banks failed and factories stopped producing, with industrial output falling by more than 50%. These hard times made German politics even more divided. The government struggled to handle the crisis, so many people turned to extreme political parties, such as the Nazi Party. Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party took advantage of this. They promised to fix Germany's problems, offering jobs and food to the struggling population. Hitler blamed the current government, called the Weimar Republic, for the crisis and attacked it in his speeches. The Nazis also criticized past leaders like Gustav Stresemann, who had tried to build better relationships with the countries after World War I. The Nazis said deals like the Locarno Treaties and Germany joining the League of Nations only helped other countries, especially France. In this desperate time, Hitler's promises sounded good to many people. At home, he said he would create jobs and rebuild the economy, while rejecting the Treaty of Versailles, strengthening the government's army, and restoring the nation's pride. The Great Depression made many Germans believe Hitler and the Nazis were their only hope to escape poverty. By the early 1930s, the Nazi Party had grown into a major political force. The Great Depression was a key reason the Nazis became so popular. Without this economic crisis, Hitler might never have gained the support he needed to rise to power.
There were many factors that contributed to how Adolf Hitler was able to dictate over all of Germany. Some of these factors include Heinrich Brüning, a political scientist who called for unscheduled elections in 1930. Throughout these elections, Nazis increased their seats from 12 to 107, winning almost 6 million votes. Hitler stood for the Nazis against General Paul von Hindenburg in the 1932 elections. He was able to pull off an astounding feat, gaining 11 million votes in the first round and 13 million in the final. Considering the aftermath of the elections, Hitler was approached by army leader Karl von Schleicher and nobleman Franz von Papen to be Chancellor of Germany in 1933. They thought it'd be useful to have Hitler and his party on their side, as well as the notion that Adolf Hitler could be controlled. President Hindenburg agreed to the plan in hopes of creating a stable government, while Hitler secured his position as dictator in the post of chancellor, with only 2 other Nazi Party members in the cabinet.
Hitler's first step to making Nazi Germany the dictatorship we are all familiar with it as was to call a new election. So on February 17th, 1933, he called an election. He was hoping to get a Nazi majority in the Reichstag, which was the German parliamentary building. It was, however, burnt down shortly after, and Hitler placed the blame for this on communists.
This is the will of God. Now it is obvious why I think it is my duty to the nation to save the German people from the danger of communism.
Specifically, Marinus van der Lubbe, who was a semi-prominent communist who already had a few counts of arson to his name. He was then executed. Having successfully turned public opinion away from more left-leaning parties, so the communists, the socialists, he managed to place some suppression on free speech and expression, and he also imprisoned many socialist and communist leaders with few other options and poor public opinion of the Nazi Party's opposing parties. They managed to get 46% of the vote that year. He then passed the Enabling Act, which allowed him to pass laws without needing the Reichstag's consent. He achieved this by convincing more centrist parties of his cause and by having the communist representatives in the Reichstag removed from their positions. Once the Enabling Act was passed, Hitler shifted his focus to Nazifying the rest of the parliament. He abolished state parliaments. This gave him full control of more or less every aspect of the country, and he also banned the country's socialist and communist parties, and this also led to a lot of other political parties disbanding. In doing so, he had made Germany a one-party state by July of 1933, which was also the same year that he built and opened the first concentration camp at Dachau. It was used to imprison political enemies as well as Jews, homosexuals, Roma people, and Jehovah's Witnesses. By the time 1934 came along, he had once again switched his suspicions to the SA, who were a paramilitary group made mostly of ex-Freikorps and ex-soldiers. They were led by Ernest Röhm, and they were seen as a threat to Hitler's control of the army because that was what Ernest Röhm wanted. As a result of this issue, he had the SS, who were a small part of the SA, made entirely out of Aryan men. He had them kill over 200 SA leaders, as well as his other political enemies, in what is now known as the Night of Long Knives, which was a name given to the event after the knives that SS officers used. His final step to making it a dictatorship was after the president of Weimar Germany, the last president, died. That was Paul von Hindenburg. It was 1934 when he died.
Whose name has wielded a magic power for the whole witness to the profound respect felt by foreign nations for a great German.
merged the roles of Chancellor and President, making himself Germany's Führer. In August of 1934, he had the entire German army swear loyalty to him, and he was able to fully control Germany, and he was also able to enforce Nazi doctrine in all areas of life. In 1915, once he had already established it as a dictatorship, he passed the Nuremberg Laws, which decreed that not only could Aryan people not have relationships with Jews, but also that they were the only people in Germany able to be full citizens with actual political rights.